The world will open to you like an oyster. No, not like an oyster. The world will open to you like a magnificent vagina. And how true is that? I'm constantly saying it to everybody at the office. I was fired. Hi, I'm Louis Virtel, and this is Trophy Strife, the show about award show winners and losers, but mostly losers, who should be winners. On this show, we get into it about who lost the Oscar and why they should have won. However, today I'm doing something different and finally talking about some winning performances. This is going to be the 10 best Oscar-winning performances of the 90s, how they won, who they were up against, and yes, who got snubbed that year. This video will cover rankings 10 through 6 because we want to make it absolutely painful for you. So you'll have to wait for numbers 5 through 1. But I'm asking you all for your personal top 5 best performances of the 90s in the comments. Please only pick Oscar-winning performances. And if you're convincing enough, maybe I'll talk about your faves in part 2. It's going to be a lot of work on your part. I've never thought about the 90s just as a group of winners before, and I'm shocked to say, looking back, I thought I would be obsessed with more of them than I was. What ended up in my top 10 surprised me, and maybe it'll surprise you too. Okay, let's get started. First, an honorable mention. Number 11 on my list, Gene Hackman in Unforgiven. Look, I'm not somebody who's begging for a revisionist Western. I don't need to learn how the violence means way more than you thought it meant, or there's a lot of pain behind all of this wrestling outside of saloons. But there really is something moving about this movie, even if you're not a fan of Clint Eastwood's acting, and I count myself among those people. But Gene Hackman has that Thelma Ritter quality we talked about in an earlier video, where you just believe that this person, 1, exists, 2, that you've known them for years, and 3, kind of believe them in any role. I love Gene Hackman, of course, in his first Oscar-winning performance in The French Connection, but I really prefer him in down-to-earth, relatable roles, like in Twice in a Lifetime, the 1985 family drama where he falls in love with another woman and his family falls apart. But here, he is just a definitive bad guy, somebody who stacks up with the big heavies in Western history. In order for this movie to work, you have to believe he is bone-chilling, and there's not a scene in this movie where he doesn't prove that. Now, onto the list. Number 10, Martin Landau in Ed Wood, 1994. First things first about Ed Wood, it is the best thing Tim Burton ever did. Second of all, Martin Landau, here on his 3rd Oscar nomination, plays legendary actor Bela Lugosi. Once upon a time in Hollywood, celebrities were amazing. They used to be curmudgeonly and Hungarian. Here he plays towering icon Bela Lugosi, down on his luck, who is now forced to make movies with Ed Wood, the definitive worst director of all time, and yet also zaniest, and thank God Ed Wood exists. Ed Wood is a very stylish black and white movie about a director who gave us such camp classics as Glenn or Glenda and the definitive, what was once called the definitive worst movie of all time, Plan 9 from Outer Space. But Ed Wood was also very tenacious, and he sort of pulled Bela Lugosi from retirement to give him one last breath of cinematic glory, or whatever, before he died. In this very stylish movie, you get to see all sides of Bela Lugosi. He's sweeping and egotistical, he's wounded and vulnerable, and a lot of it unfolds as he's filming for Ed Wood. So it's also this love letter to movie making every step of the way in this character's journey. Now, Martin Landau is perfect as Bela Lugosi the minute he steps on the screen, but when you look at his other roles, it does not feel very fitting that this role would slip on him like a glove. Starting from North by Northwest in the 50s, where he plays a handsome and, I guess, queer villain. Moving on to his definitive TV role in the 60s, Mission Impossible, where he served as a cast member alongside his wife, the fabulous Barbara Bain. And then he needed a career resurgence himself, like Bela Lugosi, in the late 80s. This comeback was solidified in the movie Crimes and Misdemeanors, in which he has a sort of creepy gravitas that makes him one of the more interesting characters in Woody Allen's entire filmography. We'll get into an even more interesting character moving on. Hint, but watching him in Ed Wood, you are instantly laughing at him, you are instantly pitying him, and you are instantly just in awe of his look. This is somebody who belongs in movies of the 30s and 40s, and the shadows hit his face in such a striking way. It's such a cinematically complex performance. Also, this is a pretty amazing category in Oscars history. Best Supporting Actor 1994. He's up against Samuel L. Jackson in Pulp Fiction, could have easily won. Chaz Palminteri in Bullets Over Broadway, which, you are going to hate me for saying this, he is the best performance in that movie. And that will boggle your mind in a second when we get to somebody else on this list. Then there's Paul Scofield in Quiz Show. Quiz Show is the movie I've seen on this list the most times. Paul Scofield, maybe the most disposable performance in the movie. I'm not saying it's not good. I'm saying if we're counting Paul Scofield as a supporting character, maybe John Turturro could have been a supporting character that year. Even Ralph Fiennes, if you think John Turturro is the lead. Anyway, and then there's Gary Sinise in Forrest Gump, the Best Picture winner that year, and one of the more iconic performances of the entire 90s. But obviously there were years and years of build-up waiting for Martin Landau to get a big Oscar dais moment like this. Paul Scofield, the other veteran here, had already won an Oscar in the 60s for A Man for All Seasons, where he beat Richard Burton in Who's Afraid of Virginia Woolf, and for that, he can never be forgiven. If I had to label any one of these other nominees a snub, I'd say Samuel L. Jackson, because who doesn't remember every single line that guy says in Pulp Fiction? And also, he has not been nominated for an Oscar since then. What have we been doing? We've had the time. Number 9, Marissa Tomei in My Cousin Vinny, 1992. Woof, do I love an Oscars controversy. When her name was announced as the winner that year, people assumed that Jack Palance, who was reading the envelope, did something wrong or just said the last name he had thought of, and it couldn't have been that Marissa Tomei, former A Different World cast member, had just smoked Judy Davis, Joan Plowright, Vanessa Redgrave, and Miranda Richardson at the Oscars. But it was the case. And I'll tell you why it happened. First of all, let's get into My Cousin Vinny. Ralph Macchio and his buddy are up for committing a murder they didn't do. They have no money, so they have to hire their cousin Vinny, played by Joe Pesci, to represent them. He's never won a case before, and his girlfriend happens to be this hot-headed person, Mona Lisa Vito, played by Marissa Tomei. We complain all the time at the Oscars that we don't get broad comic wins. The fact that there is so much shade thrown at this win, so much controversy, really is not a credit to us, because it is a very funny performance at every step of the way. I would actually compare this win to Helen Hayes in Airport. The reason being, if we didn't have this character's humor, there would be a black hole in this movie and there wouldn't be a reason for it to exist. I also love this win because it's such a competitive year. I love all the performances she's up against this year. Judy Davis in Husbands and Wives, another one of my favorite Woody Allen performances. This is a woman falling apart whose husband has left her and she's starting to date, and she could not be angrier, could not be ruder, and could not be more falling apart at the seams. And she also could not wear more brown lipstick. This is just a Judy Davis thing she does. Joan Plowright in Enchanted April. Now, she definitely was 5th this year, but she is in one of my favorite categories of people on screen, and that is a persnickety woman on vacation. Can we please get more of these? Vanessa Redgrave in Howard's End. Vanessa Redgrave, probably one of the 10 greatest actors who ever lived. Have you seen her as Isadora Duncan in the movie Isadora? Weird movie where they actually show the scarf accident that killed her, but she's still amazing every step of the way, even faking the ballet. And then there's Miranda Richardson playing a scorned wife in Damage, my favorite erotic thriller of all time. Jeremy Irons and Juliette Binoche star in that one, and they did not get along. Juliette Binoche told us that herself on this podcast, Keep It, the one I host. It's hard to say which of these other actresses would have won had Marissa Tomei not been in the lineup. I'm going to go with Judy Davis because I think it's such a meaty supporting actress role with a lot of grit, a lot of heart, and a lot of hard laughs. I think Miranda Richardson needed one more scene. I think Joan Plowright needed one more dramatic moment. And while Vanessa Redgrave has a lot of quiet power in Howard's End, I don't think the role is juicy enough to win. But Marissa Tomei has something that really all of these other performances don't have, and that is instant quotability. How do I know this? It is literally immortalized on film. Have you seen the movie Fire Island recently? The Queen's playing a game of Heads Up, quote this scene verbatim. And I think also My Cousin Vinny is one of the most casually rewatched movies in history. You know, sort of like a Devil Wears Prada or something that's on TBS in the mid-afternoon. You can't shut it off once it's on, and once it's on, you're reciting it right alongside the characters. Marissa Tomei was eventually nominated for 2 more Oscars, one for In the Bedroom in 2002, any movie where a mother throws a plate at the ground, I'm in. And The Wrestler in 2009, where she went toe-to-toe with Mickey Rourke and was extremely compelling. But Marissa Tomei's career is pretty interesting post-Oscar win. You would think she would get more standout comic roles, but really she became this utility player who's sort of in any movie at any given point. You wouldn't be surprised if she were in Spider-Man, which she was, and you also wouldn't be surprised if she were in The Big Short, which she also was. She kind of belongs everywhere and does everything, and I'm surprised that she hasn't taken another brash comic role like Mona Lisa Vito. Number 8, Susan Sarandon in Dead Man Walking, 1995. Susan Sarandon, one of our venerable greats. Now, there was a lot of build-up to Susan Sarandon's first and only Oscars win. It began with Atlantic City in 1981, a working-class drama that turns into a really fun thriller by the end of it. Obviously, a decade later, she was in Thelma and Louise with Gina Davis, one of the few movies to score the rare double Best Actress nomination. She was in Lorenzo's Oil, a really interesting movie about, among other things, parenting that you should see. And then The Client, one of the few John Grisham-based movies that actually had a place at the Oscars. And also The Client, like the other 1994 movie Bullets Over Broadway, has a very underrated performance by Mary Louise Parker, who has never been nominated for an Oscar. Should I do a whole video about that? This is to say nothing of the Rocky Horror Picture Show, or The Witches of Eastwick, or Bull Durham, or Little Women, or Stepmom, or oh my god, she was in the movie Tammy. She's literally in everything. But in Dead Man Walking, she plays the very real Sister Helen Prejean, who is counseling murderer Matthew Poncelot, played by Sean Penn in an Oscar-nominated role. And their relationship has no parallel in cinematic history. It's very compelling from the jump. And this is one of the few movies I can think of that is less guided by plot and more by the compelling self-possession of the main character. It's less like you're watching this movie to figure out what's going to happen to the Sean Penn character, and more like you're learning about an entire way of life through the Sister Helen Prejean. There's a casual, unpretentious wisdom to this character that shines in every frame. When she's up against the bars looking at Matthew Poncelot, talking to him, as much as he is breaking down and showing vulnerability, you are clued into her very broadly spiritual and welcoming world. I don't know. You know what this character has that most don't? An aura. That is what is amazing about this character and performance. The nominees for Best Actress this year, across the board, very impressive. All four corners of Caucasia represented soundly. You've got Elizabeth Shue in Leaving Las Vegas, a movie I refuse to watch again. It is so grim. You've got Sharon Stone in Casino giving the performance of a lifetime, though I did love her in The Laundromat from a couple years ago, too. There's Meryl Streep in The Bridges of Madison County, a movie that makes sitting around in Iowa seem glamorous. There's Emma Thompson in Sense and Sensibility. She won an Oscar for adapting it, has an awesome speech at the Oscars, and an even better one at the Golden Globes. But I actually prefer other Emma Thompson performances. You ever seen Carrington, Remains of the Day? I actually love her in a baddie comic role in the movie Impromptu, which is about George Sand and Frederick Chopin and a wild weekend of whimsy they all share together. Of these four nominees, I think my favorite is Meryl Streep in The Bridges of Madison County. There's just a new version of Meryl that I don't believe we had gotten in a drama before. She had a casual sexiness and earthiness that we hadn't seen in other movies. And by the way, she still did deserve a nomination for She-Devil. I'm still waiting for the comeuppance on that. Number 7, Whoopi Goldberg in Ghost, 1990. Where would the Oscars be without this win? It's such a one-of-a-kind performance that is endearing from the jump. Ghost was not just a phenomenon in 1990, it was a wildly unexpected phenomenon. I don't think anybody ever thought this movie should win a screenplay Oscar, but based on the sheer audience love of this movie, it vaulted to the fore and won that Oscar, beating one of my favorite scripts ever, Metropolitan by Whit Stillman. By this point in her career, Whoopi Goldberg was an A-list actress. She had already had a nomination for The Color Purple in 1985, one of the towering performances of that decade. She lost to Geraldine Page in The Trip to Bountiful, which is also one of the towering performances of that decade. If you ever meet somebody who says Geraldine Page doesn't deserve an Oscar, they're not me and they're not a friend of mine. In the years that followed, she starred in a bunch of comedies. Some of them were okay, some of them were worse. And I'm talking about you, burglar. But obviously now she's an EGOT winner, and every morning on ABC you can watch her fight with 4 other women. I'm a sucker for a broad comic performance, and in Ghost, which as we know is a supernatural drama where Patrick Swayze dies and he's still trying to get messages across to his beloved Demi Moore, who has a wonderful haircut and a love of pottery that is exhibited really well in one scene. Whoopi Goldberg plays Oda Mae Brown, a schlock fortune teller who gets sucked into an actual situation where she must communicate with the dead, and her exasperation and impatience end up being really funny and end up building a relationship with the Patrick Swayze character that's so very fun. And also, Ghost is a movie where everybody is good. Tony Goldwyn, Demi Moore, Patrick Swayze, but you are so grateful every time Whoopi Goldberg is on screen. And I think for that reason alone, she should get nominated for an Oscar. And as I said, anytime you can be instantly quotable in a movie, I think the Oscars have to pay attention. We're still saying Molly, you in danger, girl. In fact, people who shouldn't be saying Molly, you in danger, girl are saying Molly, you in danger, girl.
Molly, you in danger, girl.
I also really like this field of nominees. You have Annette Bening in The Grifters. This is a very stylish movie about thieves that I don't think ultimately works, but everyone looks amazing in it. The actors are all great. You get Angelica Houston with shock white hair. This is a movie about double-crossing thieves and family relations that I don't think ultimately works. In fact, I don't really understand the grifts some of them do. What is Angelica Houston doing at the racetrack? You explain it to me. There's Lorraine Bracco in Goodfellas because sometimes Scorsese says, let's put a woman in the film. You have Diane Ladd at Wild at Heart, which is a wild nomination altogether. Please see this movie. She would be nominated the following year for Rambling Rose 2. That's a bit more of a conventional part, but man, Diane Ladd could do anything. Then there's Mary McDonnell in Dances with Wolves. This is not a performance that has stuck with me, but 2 years later she starred in a movie called Passion Fish that no one remembers, where she co-stars with Alfre Woodard. Please watch this movie. It is a very compelling drama about an actress. I think the number one credit I can give to Whoopi Goldberg in Ghost is there is no second option for who could have played this character. Absolutely none. It could only be her. It's her facial expressions. It's her wild reaction shots, her keen wit, and her gritty sophistication in this low-down profession that make it so enjoyable. There's a common conception that when somebody loses a really well-deserved Oscar, that the next nomination they get is to make up for it. We call this the Paul Giamatti and Cinderella Man complex. But honestly, Whoopi Goldberg in Ghost is nothing like what she did in The Color Purple. They don't remind me of each other at all. And in fact, if she did not win for this movie, there would basically be a hole in Oscars history. There's nothing else like this performance, and it's one we'll be rewatching forever and ever and ever, because I'm telling you this movie is on TBS right now. But before we get to number 6, I want to remind you to please subscribe to this channel, like this video, and to come up to me in person and tell me I'm doing a good job. Number 6, Diane Whis in Bullets Over Broadway, 1994. Diane Whis, one of the definitive supporting actresses of all time. She had previously won an Oscar for Hannah and Her Sisters in 1986, and now she's such a definitive supporting actress, she's actually going back and playing other winners of the Best Supporting Actress. She's playing Ruth Gordon in Rosemary's Baby right now. She doesn't care, she'll do anything. Bullets Over Broadway as an entire movie is very underrated to me. Not only are all the characters really fun and eye-popping and all have an iconic look, the plot is really interesting. The comic turns are really interesting. I can't think of a deficiency this movie has. And this is during a time when Woody Allen is doing a lot of experimental things. You've got Everyone Says I Love You, or Deconstructing Harry, or the abysmal Shadows and Fog, where we did give Madonna a fun haircut. But this is a movie teeming with personality, and Diane Whis has the biggest personality of them all. She plays Grande Dame of the theater, Helen Sinclair, who wears things we all have around the house: a turban, a large feather, robes, things you wear just to get through a Wednesday. It surprises me to rank this performance this high because in a movie about colorful Broadway characters, you basically expect to meet someone like Helen Sinclair, but it's the diction, the sheer volume of her language, and the sheer bravado with which she delivers this performance that makes it so magnetic and so funny. Like, the other characters don't stand a chance talking to her. She lives in her own world and steamrolls the other characters in a puff of cigarette smoke whenever she appears. This is also the interesting case of an actress being up against somebody else in the same movie. That'd be Jennifer Tilly, who plays Olive Neal in this movie. And guys, if she had won, I would not have been upset. And frankly, I probably would have put her at the same spot on this list. But Diane Whis did win it. And I'm thankful because it is the more quotable character in the movie, ultimately. 2 martinis, please, very dry. Oh, you want one too? 3. There's, of course, Don't Speak, which on the first day of acting class, everybody should have to keep doing it until they get it right. And the very underrated, You stand on the brink of greatness. The world will open to you like an oyster. No, not like an oyster. The world will open to you like a magnificent vagina. And how true is that? I'm constantly saying it to everybody at the office. I was fired. I think Jennifer Tilly was her main competition that year, but Uma Thurman being in Pulp Fiction, a movie that marked a new advent in cinema, she had to be close behind too. Then you have Helen Mirren in The Madness of King George, giving a respectable performance, but she simply can't take enough of the spotlight away from Nigel Hawthorne, who is amazing in that movie. Then you have Rosemary Harris in Tom and Viv, which is about T.S. Eliot and his wife Vivian Haywood Elliott. This is definitely 5th ranked on the list. If you want to see an interesting Rosemary Harris performance, remember The Undoing? She appears on Zoom and talks about how Hugh Grant's definitely a killer, and she knows it because she's his mom. And of course, Jennifer Tilly is now a Real Housewife. I don't know how I feel about Andy Cohen getting his mitts on Oscar nominees. I don't feel safe. One recent example of co-stars facing off against each other in the Best Supporting Actress category was Everything Everywhere All at Once, where Jamie Lee Curtis straight up stole an Oscar from Stephanie Hsu. I don't know why or how it happened or who was watching at the time. I'm actually a fan of the Machiavellian machinations that go into who enters what category. Like for Wicked, it seems like Ariana Grande is going to go supporting, and then Cynthia Erivo is going to go lead. And maybe both of those are lies, but we have to accept them, and it's looking good for Ariana. I said at the beginning of the video that something felt disappointing about the 90s Oscars winners, and it's not that there's a lack of talent. I think it's that most of these performances fit squarely in one genre. It's a drama, it's a Western, it's a comedy. I sort of crave wins like Cloris Leachman in The Last Picture Show, where you get the tough monologues, but you also get this Western landscape. It's also this evocative, emotional experience. Or Sandy Dennis in Who's Afraid of Virginia Woolf, where she's a drunken mess and there's a lot of comic opportunity there, but it's also a searing drama on the side. I prefer all of those things to mesh a bit more. All right, that is approximately one half of my list of the best Oscars performances of the 90s. If you're ready for part 2 already, then make sure to subscribe. I host a podcast called Keep It with my co-host, I don't know his name, Ira Madison III, and that comes out weekly on this channel, and we will be talking about this year's Oscars race at length, and I wouldn't want you to miss that.